The Lakers organization is reportedly working overtime to suppress the footage, but the story has already spread like wildfire. After the team's embarrassing loss to the Knicks, Shaquille O'Neal allegedly confronted LeBron James in the arena tunnel, and what followed nearly spiraled out of control. Witnesses say tensions were already high, and the exchange quickly turned heated. It all began with a single moment that set everything off.
Because the game is different. Like, I want people to understand, and our fans to understand, that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2020s.
Here's a rewritten, tighter, and more cinematic version with stronger pacing and added intensity, like a high-drama sports documentary narration. According to insiders and multiple eyewitnesses, by the time the final buzzer sounded, Shaq was already in position, planted in the tunnel outside the locker room like a 7-foot gatekeeper. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't yelling. He was just waiting, blocking the path. And when LeBron came through, Shaq asked one question that reportedly made the entire Lakers entourage go silent. By then, Rob Pelinka was already on edge, reading the body language, trying to anticipate the collision before it happened. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't spontaneous. This was brewing. And LeBron quickly realized something in that moment. His latest podcast comments hadn't just gone viral. They had landed. And they had landed on the one man big enough, physically and historically, to challenge everything about his legacy. If you thought that podcast clip was controversial, insiders say the footage the Lakers are scrambling to contain is on another level entirely. This was supposed to be a night about longevity. Instead, it looked like the beginning of a fracture. February 1, 2026. Madison Square Garden. Lakers lose 112-100, and honestly that score flatters them. OG Anunoby and Landry Shamet were slicing through the defense like it was a preseason walkthrough. Luka Doncic dropped 30 with surgical ease. LeBron finished with 22, but he looked 41. Not ageless. Not timeless. 41. After the game, LeBron walked through the MSG tunnel, likely already crafting the narrative for the next episode of the pod, when he ran into what witnesses described as a literal wall. Leaning against concrete. Arms folded. No cameras. No jokes. No TNT energy. Just 325 pounds of old-school presence blocking the doorway. People nearby said the temperature shifted instantly. 0 to 100. Shaq didn't greet him. Didn't smile. Didn't joke. He looked LeBron straight in the eyes and said, "How are you calling this era harder when you play in a league where staring at someone too long gets you a technical?" Everything stopped. LeBron tried to respond, talking about pace, space, how the modern game moves faster, how players cover more ground now than ever before. Shaq cut him off. "Pace doesn't matter when nobody's allowed to touch you," he snapped. "You're talking about speed because you don't want to admit your body isn't what it used to be, and this era protects you." Then he went deeper. Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, load management, missed games, recovery timelines. "In my day," Shaq reportedly said, "you played until something broke. Now guys miss 3 weeks for landing funny." That's when staff stepped in. You had suited executives trying to create space between two generational giants, one still playing, one representing a vanished era. Non-team staff froze in the background, watching history crack in real time. But here's what makes this confrontation explosive. The numbers don't neatly support LeBron's argument. LeBron loves pointing to pace. But the 1984-85 season averaged 102 possessions per game. Same in 85-86. In 2026? Around 99.5. The 84-85 Denver Nuggets ran at 107. Showtime Lakers consistently pushed above 100, and they were doing it while getting hand-checked, bumped midair, and shoved into the photographers. There was no freedom of movement. There was survival. Look at the Jordan rules. The Pistons had an unofficial blueprint on how to physically punish Michael Jordan every time he attacked the rim. No automatic flagrant ones. No review center. Just hardwood and consequences. Now fast forward to 2026. LeBron invests over $1 million annually in recovery, cryotherapy, hyperbaric chambers, private chefs, customized travel. He sleeps on full-size beds on private jets. In the 80s, legends flew commercial, shared armrests, checked into regular hotels. Recovery meant ice bags and willpower. Shaq has said before, publicly in April 2025, that LeBron's longevity is partly a product of the era's protection and science. So when LeBron framed today's NBA as harder, Shaq didn't hear analysis. He heard revisionist history. And in that tunnel at MSG, it stopped being a debate about eras. It became personal. Insiders say that one question, the one that froze the room, wasn't just about physicality. It was about authenticity. And for the first time in a long time, LeBron didn't have the final word.
It's less physical. And he's always done this his whole career. He never really done that. So, but the fact that it's less physical, I think it definitely helps him.
And here's the uncomfortable part for LeBron supporters. Shaq wasn't entirely wrong. If LeBron had to fly coach after back-to-backs and then spend 48 minutes getting hacked by Rick Mahorn in the paint, there's a real question about whether he's still dominating at 41. That's not disrespect, that's context. The modern superstar experience is built around optimization, recovery teams, custom nutrition, charter flights, precision load monitoring, everything designed to extend careers. Back then, it was survival. And even Michael Jordan, the man most people still call the GOAT, stepped into this debate in June 2025. MJ didn't rant. He didn't yell. He just calmly pointed at what he believes has changed. Competitive edge. He questioned the culture. He talked about how missing games used to feel unthinkable unless something was actually broken. How the expectation wasn't preservation, it was presence. If fans bought a ticket, you played. If your team needed you, you suited up. Jordan didn't just criticize load management. He framed it as symbolic of something bigger, a shift from hunger to maintenance, from proving yourself nightly to protecting your long-term numbers. And that's what makes this tunnel confrontation so explosive. Because when LeBron says today's game is harder, he's talking about speed, skill, spacing, and analytics. When Shaq and MJ push back, they're talking about physical punishment, durability, and mentality. Two completely different definitions of hard. One era values efficiency. The other worshipped endurance. And right now, the league feels caught between those philosophies, with LeBron standing as the face of the modern version, and Shaq and Jordan representing the old guard that refuses to let history be rewritten without a fight.
That type of competition, that type of competitiveness is what I live for, and I miss it. I miss that aspect of playing the game of basketball.
Michael Jordan played all 82 games in 9 different seasons. 9. In an era where hand-checking was legal and hard fouls were part of the scouting report. Kobe Bryant? He famously played through a broken finger on his shooting hand and refused to sit. Taped it up. Adjusted his release. Kept going. That was the mindset. Now fast forward to today, and LeBron's camp will publicly defend sitting out when a knee feels tight or when the schedule gets dense. They'll call it smart, strategic, long-term thinking. But to the old guard, it sounds like something else. And that's why Shaq's Netflix Power Moves ranking earlier this year hit like a subtle warning shot. When he was asked to list his all-time top 10, he didn't hesitate. MJ at number 1, Kobe at number 2, and LeBron? 3. Not 4, not 5. Still elite, still legendary, but not untouchable. 4 years, the debate has been framed as 1A and 1B between Jordan and LeBron. Shaq quietly rejected that framing. By putting Kobe above LeBron, he wasn't just ranking talent, he was ranking mentality, availability, killer instinct. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Because in this era war, every ranking feels like a statement.
Number 3, I'm going to go with the King, LeBron James. Number 2, I'm going with rest in peace, Kobe Bean Bryant. And number 1, the greatest player of all time is Michael Jordan.
And Shaq's reasoning wasn't complicated. For him, it comes down to one thing: killer instinct. Michael Jordan didn't hop on a podcast to explain how tough his era was. He didn't break down analytics or talk about pace and efficiency. He showed you, night after night, playoff after playoff. No load management, no narrative control, just results. Teams tried to rough him up, tried to bait him, tried to physically wear him down. He responded by ending their seasons. That's the difference, Shaq argues. It wasn't about speeches, it was about fear. And if you think Shaq is alone in being tired of the explanations, you clearly didn't hear Paul Pierce's response to LeBron's speed of the game theory. Pierce didn't just disagree, he torched the whole argument. He basically said running up and down faster doesn't mean it's tougher if defenders can't touch you. To him, that's cardio, not combat. But here's the deeper issue. The real reason Shaq reportedly snapped in that tunnel wasn't just one podcast clip. It wasn't just rankings. It wasn't just nostalgia. It's identity. For the players who believe they built this league through physical sacrifice and psychological warfare, There's one element they think LeBron doesn't consistently command: fear. Shaq has been saying it openly throughout 2025 and 2026. On interviews, on panels, on air. He's flat out stated that nobody was ever truly afraid of LeBron the way teams feared Jordan, or even Kobe. Not afraid of his stats. Not afraid of his longevity. Afraid of him. Afraid that if the game was close in the fourth, your season might end right there. That's what Shaq believes separates greatness from myth. And when LeBron publicly reframes the era conversation, guys like Shaq don't just hear analysis. They hear someone trying to redefine the cost of dominance. And for legends who bled for that definition, that hits personal.
I didn't think players really feared LeBron like they did Jordan.
I've never really heard any players say they fear LeBron.
Here's a cleaner, more cinematic rewrite with sharper flow and more balance while keeping that intense debate tone. And that's the part some people quietly agree with. With LeBron, you respect the resume. You respect the numbers, the longevity, the consistency. But fear? That's a different conversation. Nobody's saying opponents didn't prepare for him. Of course they did. But there's a distinction Shaq and others keep circling back to: the psychological weight. When you faced Jordan, it felt personal. When you faced Kobe, it felt predatory. Players have said it themselves. You weren't just trying to win. You were trying not to get humiliated. Not to end up on a poster. Not to have your confidence stripped in front of a national audience. It wasn't just about losing. It was about survival. That's the warrior energy people romanticize about the 90s and early 2000s. Rivalries weren't collaborative. There were no off-season podcast circuits laughing it up with the next generation. You didn't see Jordan hosting shows with his competition. You didn't see Kobe building public friendships with guys he was trying to eliminate in May. Now the culture is different. Players train together in the summer. They share agents. They appear on each other's podcasts. LeBron chopping it up with Tyrese Halliburton feels normal in 2026. But to the old guard, it looks foreign. Too friendly. Too comfortable. That cultural shift is exactly why Shaq's ranking felt intentional. MJ at number 1. Kobe at number 2. LeBron at number 3. Shaq has first-hand experience. He played with Kobe. He competed in Jordan's shadow. So when he implies that if your life depends on one bucket, you're calling the Mamba, that's not random commentary. That's a statement about mentality under pressure. And if you really want context, go rewatch the late 80s Pistons-Bulls battles. The physicality was brutal. Hard fouls weren't highlight clips. They were strategy. Laimbeer, Mahorn, Oakley, they tested your will as much as your skill. Larry Bird took hits that today would trigger automatic reviews and multi-game suspensions. And he still showed up the next night ready to compete. That doesn't make today's players soft. The rules changed. The league evolved. Player health became a priority. But it does highlight how different the environment was. So when LeBron goes on a podcast and says calf injuries are the new high ankle sprains, reframing durability conversations in modern terms, critics hear something else. They hear a generational disconnect. To them it sounds like explanation. To the old guard, greatness never needed explaining. It just needed proving.
I think when I first came into the league, Reese, some of the biggest concerns of injuries was like, a high ankle sprain. You was afraid to step on somebody's ankle because there was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. Because there was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. And if you land on somebody's ankle, you get a high ankle sprain, you out 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that's not really much you don't really see that as much now because the game is so spread open, it's so much pace. But now you see the new high ankle sprain is the calf.
LeBron's argument is that today's game moves so fast, so much space, so many possessions, that even minor injuries carry the same toll as the brutal hits players absorbed in the 80s and 90s. That take. It nearly made Shaq explode. Because from his perspective, speed doesn't equal punishment. Shaq built an entire Hall of Fame career getting hammered like a redwood in the paint. Double teams. Forearms. Elbows. Intentional fouls that weren't disguised as hard contests. They were designed to wear you down. And if we're talking about pain tolerance, what about Isaiah Thomas in the 1988 finals? Sprained ankle so swollen it barely fit inside the shoe. Hobbling up and down the court. And what did he do? Dropped 25 points in a single quarter. On one leg. That's the image the old generation sees when they hear phrases like, the modern era is harder. To them, rest days, recovery budgets, and billion-dollar sports science departments don't scream difficulty. They scream protection. Then there's the other comment that struck a nerve, the idea that the 80s NBA was just 4 guys standing in the paint. Like it was some slow-motion museum exhibit filled with unathletic big men clogging lanes. Shaq took that personally, because you're not talking about statues. You're talking about Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, a young, lean Shaq himself, 7-footers who ran the floor, protected the rim, switched when they had to, dominated physically and technically. These weren't sitters. They were apex defenders in a different ecosystem. That's why Shaq's recent interview with NBC News carried weight when he revealed his all-time fantasy starting five: MJ, Kobe, Karl Malone, Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon. Notice something? LeBron wasn't there. And when Shaq leaves you off a lineup like that, it's not accidental. It's philosophical. Because for him, greatness isn't just numbers, pace, or versatility. It's intimidation, durability, ruthlessness, and in his mind, that's still the standard.
So if you had to do your all-time NBA starting five, do you have one?
Kobe and Mike.
Okay.
That's the 1 and the 2. The 3, I gotta go with Bird.
Okay.
4, I gotta go with Malone. And 5, I gotta go with Hakeem.
You left somebody out.
No.
Here's a cleaner, high-drama rewrite with stronger structure and sharper pacing. He left LeBron off completely. And here's what made it louder: he left himself off too. That's how deliberate it felt. When the interviewer brought up LeBron's name, Shaq didn't hesitate. No long pause. No political answer. He basically implied that if he's building a team to win at all costs, he's choosing guys obsessed with buckets. Not branding, not podcasts, not narrative control. And if you think Shaq was the only one heated over those podcast clips, you clearly didn't catch Paul Pierce's reaction. Because Pierce didn't just disagree. He detonated the argument on live television. On his new podcast No Fouls Given, Pierce looked like he was ready to jump through the lens. Danny Green was sitting there trying to defend the modern game, talking about spacing, switching, advanced schemes, and Pierce cut him off mid-sentence. LeBron's talking about speed? Pierce snapped. We played in the 2000s when you actually had to fight through a screen. Now you just switch, relax, and call it advanced defense. His point was simple: pace doesn't mean pressure. Pierce argued that today's speed exists because defenders can't touch anyone. If you tried to run reckless transition in 2004, you were meeting Ben Wallace at the rim. Or Kevin Garnett rotating from the weak side, ready to make you think twice about your life choices. There was a physical tax. You paid it crossing half court. And this isn't random bitterness. There's history here. Pierce and LeBron's rivalry was real, especially that 2008 Eastern Conference Game 7 where they both dropped 40. That series felt personal, raw, competitive in a way that blurred into hostility. They weren't exchanging podcast invites back then. They were exchanging stares. Pierce has never forgotten that LeBron had to form a super team in Miami before finally getting past Boston. So to Pierce, when LeBron says today's game is harder, it sounds strategic. It sounds like someone reframing the era at the exact moment he's fighting Father Time in 2026. Pierce even doubled down with another shot. Switching defense today is a cheat code for lazy superstars. In our era, if you guarded a star, you stayed attached. You fought through elbows. You slid under screens. You earned your stops. Now you just point, switch assignments, and hope the other guy misses. That's the divide. LeBron frames the modern game as faster, smarter, more complex. Shaq and Pierce frame the older game as heavier, meaner, more punishing. Two completely different definitions of difficulty. And the louder this debate gets, the less it feels like basketball analysis, and the more it feels like a full-blown generational war.
Yeah, mentally
so many times I'm bruised up after the game. My shoulder hurts.
It's definitely more physical.
It's hurting.
So why were more guys playing 75 games a year then?
Because it was tougher. Well, now you're switching everything.
Here's a polished, dramatic rewrite that keeps the intensity and narrative flow, almost like a sports documentary narration. He wrapped up the segment with a blunt verdict: the modern NBA is sanitized. No sugarcoating. To Danny Green, he said the only reason players today are putting up historic numbers is simple. The enforcers have been hunted to extinction. You can't be a Charles Oakley or a Rick Mahorn anymore. Try that in 2026, and you'd be suspended for the season by November. But here's where it gets truly shocking. On January 29th, for the first time in 21 years, basically a lifetime in professional basketball, the NBA announced the All-Star starters and LeBron James wasn't on the list. Think about that. This is a player who has been a near-automatic All-Star since most fans watching were in high school. Yet the league finally moved on. Luka Doncic is the new face of the West. Fans, media, even players themselves, effectively voted LeBron into the legacy bin. The numbers tell the story. In the final Western Conference frontcourt voting, LeBron tied for 9th place in the media vote with just 3 votes and finished 9th overall in the weighted rankings. But, in plain terms, that's an eviction notice. And the brutal truth? Nobody wants to see a 41-year-old dragging a team anymore. The narrative that the game is somehow harder now is basically the only card LeBron has left to play. But look at the logic. If today's game were really faster, more physical, as LeBron claims, why do players routinely make it to 40? In the 90s, the league chewed players up by age 33. 40 minutes a night felt like a wrestling match. Surviving until 40? Impossible. LeBron's longevity isn't proof of unmatched greatness. It's proof of a sanitized era, where load management, recovery tech, and schedule control allow a player to extend a 2-decade career. And Shaq? He smelled blood in the water immediately. When Inside the NBA was picking its all-star reserves that same day, Shaq left LeBron off his list entirely, and did it with a twist of the knife. It wasn't just omission. It was a statement. The torch has passed, and the era of fearsome dominance isn't LeBron's anymore.
A few players that's only been slowed down because of their age. I don't want to see the king coming off the bench.
So you don't even want to see him at the game at all?
No.
Don't get it twisted, that wasn't praise. Shaq was making it clear. The king is basically a charity case now. He'd rather not see LeBron on the court at all, and he wasn't alone. Charles Barkley didn't hold back either. Chuck dropped a bomb, saying LeBron's time in LA is finished and predicting he's gearing up for a retirement tour back in Cleveland. The message was unmistakable. The era of LeBron as untouchable royalty? It's officially over.
There's one thing I'm sure of. This is last year with the Lakers. He's not going to play with the Lakers next year. I've always said I'd like to see him finish in Cleveland. I'm not opposed to him getting traded to Cleveland this year.
Here's a tightened, dramatic rewrite of your paragraph with clear narrative flow. Now it all clicks. LeBron already knew the All-Star results were going to be a nightmare for his brand. So he dropped that podcast as a preemptive strike, trying to shift the conversation to a hypothetical showdown between him and MJ before the world realized the league doesn't even consider him a top 5 player in his own conference anymore. And the sting doesn't stop there. The Laker legends themselves are siding with Shaq. Magic Johnson, in a September 2025 interview, didn't even hesitate. He named MJ the GOAT, citing sheer dominance over longevity stats. LeBron might have thought he could control the narrative, but the old guard has already spoken.
That's what make him a bad boy and the best that's ever done it. Don't get it twisted. I love LeBron, but
Magic made it clear. Staying in the league forever doesn't make you the best. It just makes you a long-term employee. For Shaq, being a Laker wasn't a brand move or a jersey-selling opportunity. It was a religion. He's the guy who delivered the last 3 championships the franchise has ever seen, from 2000 to 2002. He remembers what it actually took to win those titles. It wasn't pace and space. It wasn't podcasts with teammates. It was 48 minutes of getting beaten into the dirt by teams like the Spurs and Kings, squads literally built to stop him. 7-footers like Vlade Divac and Chris Webber were taking shots at his ribs every single possession. So when LeBron jumps on a podcast claiming that playing today is harder because the game is faster, it's not just a bad take. To Shaq, it's an insult to Lakers history. And he's not alone. The rest of the Lakers family is over it too. On January 28, 2026, 5-time champ Ron Harper, who lived through the Jordan Bulls and the Kobe Lakers, finally had enough. He saw that clip of LeBron comparing calf strains to high ankle sprains and didn't write a paragraph. He dropped a forward post on X. These excuses are stupid. To put that in perspective, Harper is 62. And he still has more enforcer energy than half the players in the league today. He's looking at LeBron like, bro, I was 36, starting 80 games a season, guarding the best player on the floor, and I didn't have $1 billion budget or a cryo chamber. To guys like Shaq and Harper, LeBron isn't just defending the modern era. He's trying to rewrite the struggle they actually went through, just to make his own longevity look impressive. And Los Angeles is reaching a breaking point. Fans who grew up on Magic's Showtime and Shaq's dominance don't want to hear about soft tissue injuries. They're watching a 41-year-old who seems more concerned about podcast downloads than the Lakers' defensive rating. The hypocrisy cuts deep. LeBron spent his career acting like the ultimate student of the game, constantly praising legends when it suited his narrative. But the second the debate gets tight, he flips the script. Suddenly, the era that produced MJ and Shaq wasn't tougher. It was just slower and easier. It's a classic ego move. LeBron knows the 2026 All-Star snub wasn't a fluke. It was a signal. His time is up. So he drops these podcast takes as a preemptive strike, basically saying, If I'm not winning now, it's because the game is harder than it was for Mike. But you can't have it both ways. You can't claim GOAT status because of longevity while simultaneously admitting your extended career is thanks to a sanitized, non-contact league. If the 90s were really soft, then why did it take a superhuman like LeBron until 2026 to realize he couldn't even make an all-star starting lineup? At this point, LeBron has officially burned his bridge to the inner circle of NBA greatness. He thought he was being slick, but all he did was prove he isn't on the same level as the legends before him. You can have the scoring titles, LeBron. You can play 25 seasons in a sanitized, no-contact league, but you'll never earn the respect of the men you just called inferior. The line is drawn. For everyone watching, the choice is clear. Are you rolling with the 90s enforcers who played through blood and broken bones? Or are you sticking with the podcast king? The legends have made theirs. They're standing with Shaq.